Hello, and welcome to another episode of History in the Dark. I am your host, Darkness the Curse. And before we begin, as always, thank you so much to my generous patrons, my British rail critics, and of course, my underwater train finders. Thomas Ward, Lord Captain Von Thrust III, Some Dude 267, Bright Line Blue, Joshua Long, Ohio Trucker 1, Royal Hudson 2860, Lord Hoth 444, Arthur Roy, Benjamin Owens, Panzer Kitsune 131-232, Mr. Black Rose Tribal Typhoon, and Dark Lightning 1536. You are the reason why this content remains professionally installed, and today we are going to discuss a situation where that was not actually a thing that occurred. It is taking us all the way to the land down under, in Granville, Sidney, New South Wales, and unfortunately discussing the worst rail disaster in Australian history. This is the story of the Granville rail disaster. The incident occurred on Tuesday, the 18th of January in 1977, at Granville, which is a western suburb of Sidney, New South Wales, Australia. The train was a commuter train that left the station in Mount Victoria in the Blue Mountains at 6:09 a.m. heading towards Sidney. The train consisted of 8 passenger carriages hauled by a 46 class electric locomotive, number 4620. The 46 class was actually initially built by Metropolitan Vickers while partnered with Bayer Peacock and Company in England, but they were always meant for the New South Wales Railways Department. 40 of them were created between 1956 and 58, but they turned out to be quite good. The last of them weren't withdrawn until January of 1996. As the history of the class may suggest, 4620 was operating just fine that day, and there was no trouble until it approached the station at Granville. This section of the line was lowered, and went under a bridge that carried Bold Street over the tracks. The locomotive suddenly derailed without warning, and struck one of the steel and concrete pillars that held the bridge up. The engine and the first 2 carriages managed to pass the bridge, but the first carriage broke free from the rest of the train and was torn open when it collided with a severed mast beside the track, which killed 8 people immediately. The rest of the train stopped, with just the second carriage still attached but clear of the bridge. The rear half of the third carriage and the forward half of the fourth carriage were directly under the bridge. Because of its supports being knocked out, the weight was too much for the bridge to bear, and in seconds, it collapsed. Of the total number of passengers traveling in the third and fourth carriages, half were killed instantly when the bridge fell. They never even had a chance to get away. Those that did survive were trapped in the train for hours after the accident, some of them with parts of their bodies being crushed by the bridge. It's said that a few had actually been conscious and lucid, able to talk to the rescuers, but later died of crush syndrome. If you don't know, crush syndrome is a medical condition that's characterized by major shock and kidney failure after a crushing injury to skeletal muscle. Rescuers had incredible difficulty getting into the carriages to begin with to even attempt a rescue. A bit later, the bridge settled a further 5 centimeters onto the train, which trapped 2 rescuers and crushed a portable generator. To make the situation much worse, there was a gas leak. LPG cylinders were kept year-round on board the train to be used for heating in the winter. Several people were overcome by gas from these ruptured cylinders. Due to the flammable nature of the gas, this prevented immediate use of powered rescue tools due to safety reasons. The NSW Fire Brigade managed to provide some ventilation equipment to dispel the gas, and they also sprayed a constant film of water to prevent any possibility of the gas igniting. The rescue and recovery operation lasted nearly 2 days, from 8:12 a.m. on Tuesday until 6 a.m. on Thursday. Originally, the total death toll was brought to 83, but in 2017, another victim was retroactively added to the total deaths, an unborn child, as one of the victims had been pregnant at the time. Given the severe loss of life with this disaster, an official inquiry followed immediately after the accident. The remains of the train, as well as the track and the bridge, were combed over very meticulously, trying to determine what had caused it. The locomotive was found to be in good order, but the tracks themselves were another matter. They had been fastened down poorly, and over time, the rails had spread apart, eventually exceeding the limit of the gauge that the trains operated on. This is what caused the left front wheel of 4620 to come off the rail. It also came to light that the section of track had suffered derailments in the same exact way before, both resulting in a strike on the Bold Street Bridge. One was by a locomotive in 1967, and another was a loaded coal wagon in 1975. The PTC was brought under fire, but budgetary constraints were pointed out as they had been operating at a loss of hundreds of millions of dollars a year for quite a long time. And in the months before the disaster, track inspection staff had a significantly high turnover rate, which would explain why this defect was not caught. The bridge itself was also questioned severely. When it was constructed, it was found that the base of its deck was actually 1 meter lower than the road. To solve this problem, they had simply poured concrete on top. While the bridge could support the extra weight, this addition meant that not only was the bridge more in danger of collapsing, but when it did collapse, the additional weight shredded the wooden coaches. The only good thing to come out of the investigation was that the train driver was exonerated of any wrongdoing. Given the factors at play here, there was really nothing he could have done to avert the crash. Though despite this, no one in particular was ever really held accountable. 39 years after the accident, the Granville Train Disaster Association Incorporated was formed, specifically to represent those affected by the disaster. In 2007, a plaque was placed on the bridge to mark the efforts of railway workers who assisted in rescuing the survivors on the train. And those affected also made submissions on rail safety issues, also recommending that fines for safety breaches be dedicated specifically to rail safety improvements, rather than going wherever else. Till next time, this is Darkness. I bid you all a fond farewell.